So for the first of these three introductory exercises in computer graphic design, we're going to start with the starrysky.jpg image, which I have emailed to your school email address. To access it, you simply download it from Gmail and then open it within Photoshop. So inside Photoshop, I've already opened it, but I'll just demonstrate how you do it. You go to File, Open, or Command-O as the keystroke. And then inside your downloads folder, you'll find whatever you've recently downloaded. In my case, these are all of my recently downloaded files. And in there is Starry Sky, but since I've already opened it, I don't need to open it again. There it is. A little refresher on how to zoom in and out of an image in Photoshop. You can either hit Command minus to go out, Command plus to go in. If you go too far in or too far out and you want to go back to full screen, you could do Command 0. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And by the way, if you're a PC user, the Control key is the equivalent to the Command key for Mac users. So first thing is we're going to activate the Type tool, which you can do by either clicking on the actual tool icon on the toolbar, or you can also just hit the letter T on the keyboard and it will bring up the same cursor. I'm going to draw a box with my Type tool that is about the same size as my template image here, but it's got some margins on the top, bottom, left, right. Now, right away, this placeholder type is generated by Adobe. It's a long Latin phrase that is actually a pretty traditional part of graphic design. So a little bit of history here. When things were designed that had text in them, like books or magazines, and the actual text hadn't been written yet, but the designer was working on the layout, they would feed this placeholder phrase into it to kind of make it look like it would look when they eventually got the real text. So lorem ipsum is sort of known as that placeholder type. And it goes away in Photoshop really quickly when you start typing. So I'm going to type a long time ago, comma, in a galaxy far, comma, far away. Okay, so once I've typed that phrase, I know right away that there's two things I want to change about it. I want to make it bigger, and I also want to make it yellow. So to change the size of text, right up here, sort of like Microsoft Word and any other word processing program, you have your font, you have your size, and you have your, font, style, and size. Yours probably says Myriad Pro, regular 12 point. And just a little reminder, if you haven't already done so, change this drop-down menu to smooth. It's probably by default on sharp, and you just want the smoothest rendering of your type, so make sure it's at smooth. You could select your type and type a number in there, but I'm going to show you an easy way. I'm just going to triple click on my type. You can also drag your cursor across it, or you can also hit Command A when you're in a text box, and it will select the type. I'm going to make it bigger by clicking once on the window that has my point size, 12 point. And then I can use my arrows on my keyboard to go up. So I want this to fill most of the screen, so I'm going to get it to let's see. Something like that's good. What is that? 54 points in that specific typeface worked well. Now I want to make it yellow. So down here are your color blocks, what they call the foreground color and background color. Foreground is currently white, and the background color is black. And although it looks like my type is black right now, it's actually white because when it's selected, it inverts the colors. So type is most often filled automatically with whatever your foreground color is. So I'm going to change this to yellow. So the way I did that, by the way, is I just clicked once on that color block. I'm going to find sort of the yellow area of the spectrum with this long rainbow strip here, and then I can actually get more specific and pick the actual yellow I want here, and then I'm going to hit OK. And again, when type is selected, it shows you the inverse of its color. So purple bluish is on the opposite side of the color wheel as yellow, or from yellow, so that's why it's showing it that way. But one quick thing to get out of a text box, if you hit Command Return, you'll see that it's actually yellow. It's just because it was selected. Now, to move my type around, I can go up to the Move tool. I can also hit, as it shows right here, your keystroke for the Move tool is V, so you can hit V as well, however you want to do it. Use your mouse to kind of scoot it around a little bit. If you want to get really, really, really detail oriented and move things around by single pixels, you can use your arrow in any direction and move things around by pixel. If you want to move them around by 10 pixels at a time, you would hold down Shift and it goes a little faster. Doesn't really matter at this point, just showing you some options here. However you get it to the center is good. So one thing I want to do is I want to distort this type. I want to make it look like it's moving away from the viewer, sort of smaller at the top and bigger at the bottom, just like it is in the beginnings of those Star Wars movies. So I want to distort it. But the only problem is if I go to the Edit menu, which is where Distort lives, under the Transform menu item, Distort is not available. You can see it's grayed out. So there's things I can do at this point, but I cannot distort it. And that's just part of Photoshop. You can't distort a type layer. Type layer is still in a state where you can change the font, change the spelling, change the color, and there's just no way to distort a type layer. So what we have to do is we have to convert it from a type layer into an image that's more pixel-based that we can kind of stretch around however we want. So it is called rasterizing. Two ways to do it. You can either go to the layer menu and you can go down to where it says rasterize and you can pick type. Okay, so that's kind of the long way. I didn't pick it because I'm going to show you a quicker way. Right on top of the actual layer down here, the type layer, and you know it's a type layer by the capital T, right click, rasterize type. Really two ways to do the same thing, but you'll notice now that the type layer that used to have a capital T as its little icon now has a little tiny checkerboard picture with yellow specks in it. So that is a tiny, what they call a thumbnail representation of whatever's on that layer. You can see the same thing applies for the starry sky image that we started with. And you can take these eyeballs away just to see what it looks like with nothing visible. If you're wondering what the checkerboard means, it just means transparent. So on the type layer, or what used to be a type layer, most of it is transparent except for the type, right? And this has no checkerboard on it because it fills the entire area. Cool. So next step is to distort it. So the long way, there's usually a long way and a short way. You can go to Edit, Transform, and pick Distort, or you can hit Command T, and it brings up the same transform box that would have appeared if I had selected Edit Transform in the menu. Now I can right-click and see the same menu items that were in the menu up and under Edit, but now they're available to me with just a simple right-click. So I'm going to say Distort, and I'm going to drag the top left and top right handle in towards the center for like a trapezoid kind of shape. Now you can do it freehand like this if you want. But I find that having the Shift key held down gives me more control along an axis, like so. Okay, so I like the way that looks. If I didn't, I would hit Escape to start over, and hit Command T. Same thing, right-click, Distort. I actually like the way it looked, but I just demonstrated that for you. Okay, so if I like it, I'm going to hit Return. You'll notice too that this is really blurry and pixelated, but it cleans up pretty well once you hit Return or Enter. This, there's only so much stretching you can do with pixels, so some of it got a little pixelated and blurry, but that's fine. Cool. So now we're going to do our last step, which is to add a cool fade. So in Photoshop, there are these things called masks, and I love them, and I try to put them in all my projects. So we're going to make a mask that reveals part of this image and hides the other part. Here's how it works. Layer, Layer Mask, Hide All. Okay, type goes away. Normal. Because we just told it to hide all with a mask. So if you could think of this like a stencil that you want to spray paint through with your name on it or something, maybe on a trunk. You go to camp, maybe you want your name on a trunk, but you forgot the crucial step of cutting out from that stencil. So right now everything is hidden. You don't see any of that yellow type that was there a minute ago, so we have to find a way to add some white, just sort of like cutting something out of a stencil to reveal what's below. So in this case, we want a smooth fade, like the beginning of Star Wars. So we're going to hit the letter G on the keyboard, which triggers this tool. It's called the gradient tool. Gradient, another word for a gradient these days is ombre, although the official design term for it is a gradient. So it's, any color or colors blending into each other. A rainbow is a good example of a gradient. So we're going to put our cursor right in the middle of our window, okay, pretty close to the center. Hold down Shift. The cursor, by the way, looks like a little cross. Hold down Shift, click and drag up. Not all the way up, maybe like 3/4 of the way, and let go. See what happened? So it's fading that part of the type. In fact, if you look over at what used to be the black box at the bottom right, which is your representation of a mask, now has black fading into white. So white in a mask means showing, black means hiding. And we can literally keep dragging around until we, just to see what this is doing. You'll see on the right-hand side, your little thumbnail of the mask changes. Cool. So I'm going to just do something like that. Okay, I'm ready to save it. So I'm going to go to the bottom of the layer menu and I'm going to say merge. You can actually do one of three things here. If you say merge down, it's going to merge your current layer over here with the one right below it. If you say merge visible, it's going to merge everything with an eyeball next to it into one. And if you do flatten image, it doesn't care if it's visible or above or below. It's going to flatten everything down into one layer. Normally, I don't really need to see your separate layers for your files. While you're working, obviously, you're going to accumulate a lot of layers, but in your final piece, I usually only need to see one flattened file, unless I tell you differently, if it's a different kind of project. But let's just do flatten image. One word of advice, if I flatten this, close it, reopen it, and expect those separate layers to still be there, they are not. So once you flatten something and saved it, it's kind of like you lose all those separate layers for good. So just make sure that when you do something like that, you know you don't need those separate components anymore, like the yellow type separated from the stars. Cool. So we're ready to save it. We're just going to go to File, Save As. Okay. JPEG's good for this one. Now my desktop is really cluttered. See all the stuff that's up there. But the best thing to do, I think, is to save it to your desktop, and you can call it. Let's just call this I'll call this as if I was saving it for the project. Call it Buck Star Wars is fine, as long as it has your name in it. And if you share the same first name as somebody else in the class, you can do a first name last initial. Okay, and then just pretty much say save. Once you have it saved, you can upload it to the Google Classroom, where I have set up an assignment for it. Cool. And I think that's it. The next video will be the second of the three exercises. Thanks.